Hi, Richard Lang here. Welcome to AeroOps. Today we're going to talk to Dev Rugne. Her and I worked together on the BAASS MUFON SIP project, and she's been doing research and investigation for over 30 years. Dev was the MUFON chief investigator in Oregon, and then in 1999, she was a field investigator and a dispatch operator working on the BAASS MUFON SIP project with me. In 2024, Dev became the state director for Northern California. Dev's completed over 1,000 cases for MUFON, both in Oregon and California. She wrote a book titled UFO Investigator, A Personal Look into the Circumstances, Investigations, and Discovery, which is sold on Amazon. Dev's also a team member of MADAR, the Multiple Anomaly Detection and Automated Recording Project. She was a guest on Coast to Coast with George Norrie. She's been on numerous podcasts, radio shows, and worked at conventions. Dev's been researching and investigating UFOs since the 70s. In 1977, she actually spoke with Betty Hill on the phone, and it was Betty who encouraged Dev to become a field investigator. Dev's book, you can see pictured here on the screen, is available on Amazon, and you can find it with the link at the top of the screen. Aerospace Research Operations is an organization that's domiciled in Virginia and registered with the State Corporation Commission. Also known by the acronym AEROPS, which is a scientific research cooperative that's focused on unidentified anomalous phenomena and the associated high strangeness and paranormal effects that typically result after an encounter. So, Devin, welcome to AeroOps. It's really nice to have you on this podcast. It's been a while since we've talked. Um, just give me a quick overview. Like I know, you started out in was it Oregon?
Yes, I moved to Oregon and I joined MUFON
Okay,
and became their chief investigator
right.
there.
And you've worked your way up now. You're the state director in Northern California. So that's a big job, and California's a big place. There's a lot going on there. Um, Give me an idea. How many investigators do you guys have over that way?
Well, just so that the audience understands, California is split between
Right.
North and South.
Yeah.
So Southern California, they have their own state director and their
Right.
whole team over there. Here in Northern California, we cover 45 counties,
Wow.
and that's all the way up to the Oregon border, and then over to the coast, and then to the east, all the way to Nevada. There's quite a bit of land, and a lot of it can be rural, especially up
Right.
further north. Um, California does lead in the most cases reported for
I
MUFON.
would think that, yeah.
Usually, yeah,
Yeah.
because of the fact that the huge population and our weather here, is pretty mild compared to the East Coast during the
Right.
winter. So we're
Yeah.
out. So everybody's outside a lot, and I think that contributes to them
Absolutely.
having seen something.
How many investigators roughly do you guys have out? Do you have?
Um, Probably counting myself about nine.
Okay. And then, or how just to, when I used to run the project, we were getting 800 cases a month nationally. What kind of what kind of cases, like how many cases a month are you guys seeing out there?
Well, how it looks like what MUFON does is it just includes California, the whole
Yeah,
state. So
yeah.
it's like 36 cases
Okay,
a
that's kind of
month,
what I
and
was
that's a
wanting to say.
lot
That
because
really is, yeah.
I'm hearing a lot of states only get like one or two, and so they don't have a lot of sightings getting reported there.
And you've done like over 1,000 cases in your career, which is pretty incredible. That's a lot of cases to work on. I remember during the BAASS MUFON SIP project, we worked together, and we were just talking offline here about one of the cases you worked on. You want to take a minute and talk about that?
Yeah, so I believe I was deployed by you, Richard,
Yep.
about four times.
Okay.
And one of the cases took me all the way down to Grants Pass. I was living up in the Portland area at the time. And I think that took about 3 hours drive one way.
Hmm.
So this particular case was very interesting because the witness was like a pastor, okay? And he had a lot of sightings and experiences. So I was deployed because he had an entity sighting and right across the street from where he lives. And I went out there and did the investigation and talked with him and his wife in their home. And we went outside and we talked about what he experienced. He went outside to take his dog out to go to the bathroom, and the dog was acting very strangely and kind of scared. So he ended up noticing that there was these like lights in the sky. There were UFOs. I mean, he's seen lots of craft, and he was watching that aerial event, and the dog really started to get upset and kind of crying. And he noticed that there was like a small gray across the street there was a fence. Um, and he ended up going back into the house. Well,
So was this an entity that was out? It wasn't in a craft. It was just standing outside somewhere.
yeah.
Wow.
And so he went back in the house. So I did the investigation and I spoke to them both, him and his wife. And I went out and uh, went across the street with him and by the fence. And he explained what it looked like and how tall it was. It wasn't very tall. And the fence was like a chain link fence, so it was short.
Hmm.
And it was probably about 4 feet tall. And so I just want the viewers to understand I've done a lot of cases. I've done a lot of different type of cases, even a lot of abduction cases.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, I know.
I have gone out countless times on investigations. I do a lot of live investigations, and a lot of field investigators don't do that. They get on the phone and they just
Right.
talk to someone and
Yeah,
interview
you're
them
more
that way.
boots on the ground type. Right.
Yes, I am. And I have gone out during the day, at night, never was afraid, uh, always let my state director know where I was.
Yeah.
But this case that you sent me out on, Richard, after I did the investigation, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I went and checked into the hotel and went and got some dinner, came back, and
Back in those days, we were paying for all that too. It was real nice.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was great.
Yeah.
So my plan was my plan was to go back out to his area and kind of, sit there in the car and, see what would be happening in the evening. Because this man had a lot of sightings. I mean, even his wife was talking about she could hear someone walking across the roof. She's
Mm.
even saw an entity look at her from the window of their house. Um, so there was a lot of activity, and I wanted to go and drive out there once it got dark and just sit in the car and observe if there was anything. And I've done this before. I was never afraid, but when I was sitting in that hotel thinking about my plan, I started to get a very uneasy feeling I kept looking out the window, seeing how the sun was going down, and I was waiting for it to get dark. As it
How
progressively got
how close was
dark,
the hotel to the observation point?
oh, not very far, and I can't remember because this was a long time
But it
ago.
wasn't across the street or something. It was a.
No,
Oh, okay.
no.
Okay.
I mean, because then I could have just walked outside.
Right.
Um, but my fear level, and I'm not afraid of things, my anxiety, I was getting progressively frightened, and I didn't understand what that was about. And I had the TV on, and now the fear wasn't about going there. Now it's just, there was something about I don't know. I don't know. I was so frightened, and I
You
almost didn't want to turn off the TV and
you
be in.
called me that night.
I did, and you always told me once we were deployed, it didn't matter what time it was, to always feel free to call, especially for safety reasons and stuff.
Yeah,
So
right.
I spoke to you and told you how frightened I was that this was not something that happens. And you said, well, I don't feel comfortable you going out there in the evening by
Right.
yourself anyway. So why don't you just stay put? Um, and I said, okay. It was just I needed to talk to somebody because I just never experienced that before. And in those days, I was really uh, coming to the realization that I was very psychic and I knew of things that would happen before, in a sense. So I paid attention to that and I stayed put. But
Yeah, and that's the whole, the thing is if you're, a lot of us have learned to kind of take some warning from our higher self, if you will. And when you're getting those kind of feelings, you don't want to be going out some remote place by yourself. It's, that wouldn't be a good move, you know.
yeah, yeah, and so I wanted to share that because that was something very unusual that had happened to me that normally it just doesn't.
Do you think this guy
Um,
was abducted or anything? Did
oh
he?
yes, I
Yeah,
believe so.
that's what I was wondering.
And with
They were probably getting ready to get you if you'd have gone back out there that night. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and he even after that particular 2009
Yeah.
event, um, he had some more sightings, and if memory serves me correctly, I think his mother might have always have been involved in this
Yep.
phenomenon as well, because I remember him talking about that.
Yep.
She had always called him saying that she's seen these unusual craft. So that right there showed me that there was generational there.
Yep. Which is fairly common.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, but
Well, uh,
anyway,
the next thing I want to ask you about is let's talk about your book. You've got a pretty incredible book out. And
yes,
it'll be up on
UFO.
the screen here in a minute and a link to where you can buy it. But tell us about the book.
Yeah, UFO investigator, a personal look into circumstance investigations and discovery. I wanted to, the thing is, I have been involved in uh, research and investigations of UFOs all my life. I've always been one of those who never, every day of my life, I was always thinking about UFOs, and I have been seeing UFOs a lot in my life as well. And I always knew that I wanted to write a book about it. And here's the thing, I'm a big believer in psychic ability, and I would periodically go to psychics uh, and ask some questions about things in my life or whatever. And it would be so funny was that all of them would say, before we even got started, uh, they'd say, well, you should be writing a book. And I'd laugh. I'd go, yeah, I'm going to be. I just didn't know how to start. But and that's so funny is that I had a Word document on my desktop of my computer with just one phrase that would always remind me, think about how you're going to put this book together. And and then one day it just clicked. I saw it in my mind how I wanted it to be laid out, and I just took off from there. But I wanted the book to not only talk about my being a UFO investigator, but I wanted to also kind of tell my story because I really believe that in 1969, I was a kid and something happened, and I always wondered um, what really happened. I knew something happened that was very strange, but after it had happened, I had kind of forgot about it for a while, and then it.
Did you ever get regressed about that?
So in 1990, I had a subscription to UFO magazine.
I remember
And
that.
and in 1990, they profiled, I don't remember what month that was, but they profiled a hypnotherapist here in the Bay Area, and that's where I was living. And I read about her and I thought, you know what? Um, I think I'm going to go to her because at least I know that she's open to the UFO phenomenon and she was going to think I'm nuts. So I did make an appointment and I went to see her. And I was a little apprehensive because I've never been regressed at that point. And I, everybody has that same thought. Can I be regressed? Is this real? What am I going to learn? And in a way, I was afraid to find out. And
Yeah, right. I
I
can see
went to
that. Yeah.
her. She was very good. Um, and she was in the Berkeley area, I believe. And as she regressed me, there was this huge block. And she said, well, either it's your mind blocking this or something else. And so she brought me out of it and she said, hey, look, are you, she asked me this question. She said, are you prepared to find out? Are you ready to find out what happened? And I just sat there and I said, no.
That's why it didn't work.
I was really afraid because I knew something happened. That was it. And, I just, I guess I looked at it as I didn't want all that to happen to me. And you know what I mean? Like, I didn't
Yeah.
want to be one of those that were taken against my will, and,
Huh.
examined and all this. And it wasn't that I didn't believe in that kind of thing. I was afraid to know that something like that happened to me and I didn't know about it. And I think all of us human beings, we we always want to have a sense of control of our lives, right? And
Yeah.
when you start to face that something happened to you and it was in a sense something that you just didn't say, okay, I'm willing to go or whatever. It can be frightening.
So did you ever revisit that again, or did you just let
Well,
go?
what happened was I loved how she didn't give up and said, I'm gonna let's try this again. So she put me back under and she asked me a question. She said, when was the first time you seen a UFO? Well, of course I knew what the answer was, but that's not what I said. I said, I started to talk about, and I could see it in my mind's eye. I was on a ledge overlooking the
Ooh.
desert floor, and there was this long cylindrical object on the floor. And I talked about the canoe people visiting my people from the stars. And I was kind of shocked of hearing myself say that.
Yeah.
So it turned out that I was this Indian boy in another life, and I was the chief's son. And
So
these,
you went back to another past life.
right. And she was like, oh, and she was trying to get all this
Okay, so she
information.
asked you when you first saw one, so you started talking about a previous life when you saw one.
Yeah,
Unbelievable. Yeah.
yeah, it was like, what? And
Wow.
so there was a little bit of, you're conscious as far as your memories and your thoughts because you're reliving something. And so there's this little part of me going, what? What did I say? And so she asked another question. She said, who do you know that was in that lifetime that you know in this lifetime? And
Whoa.
immediately I said, my nephew, Anthony. And him and I are very close through his life. And
Wow.
um, she said, well, who was he in that life, other life? And I said, oh, my baby brother. And I started crying and getting so emotional that I brought myself out of it from the crying and getting so emotional. I brought myself out of regression. And I kind of was embarrassed because I was like, oh, I'm sorry. She goes, no, no, no. And I go,
I'm assuming she recorded this so you go back and listen to it, right?
yeah. So
Okay.
she said, I said, is it, I said, is so I guess that's real? And she said, I go, well, why was I crying? She said, because that emotion that you feel for this particular person, this soul, you love him very much. And I said, I do. And she said, well, that'll never change from lifetime to lifetime. You'll always love that person.
Yeah.
And you you just had this love of knowing that you knew him back then and now you know
Right.
him again. And it was so real that that love, that emotion that I knew, oh my God, this was so real. And it was fascinating, but we didn't crack the fact that I was trying to find out what happened to me when I was 11. Um, and I let it go after that and just
Mm.
continued to do my being a UFO investigator as the decades went on. And then when I started to write my book, I decided it's time now to find out. And I went to another hypnotherapist uh, and ended up she had a hard time breaking through that block, but she reworded it in a way where she kind of tricked my mind or something
Yeah.
because she reworded it and boom, I saw myself um on this I was laying on this table, hard table, and I was a kid. And it was that incident that had happened, and there was um a little being standing at my feet at the end of the table. And I couldn't really move, but I could move my eyes. And I looked at it and I was just kind of staring at it. It wasn't a scary little thing because it didn't have those big black wraparound eyes. It had regular eyes, but a little bit larger than ours, you know?
Yeah.
And um, but this area right here, where the nose would be, was wrinkly, and the mouth was kind of a little slit. But he, I just kept staring at this part of his face because it was, well, there was no nose, but it was kind of wrinkly there. And I felt bad because in my 11-year-old brain, I thought he was disfigured.
He
Something
was
happened
injured or
to him.
something. Yeah.
And I felt sorry for it. And I was just thinking, oh,
Wonder
you know,
what he was thinking.
you poor thing. I was feeling bad for it because it was
Yeah. Did he
just,
communicate with you?
well, he was staring at me and I asked him, what am I doing here? And he said, he answered by saying in my mind, I didn't see a mouth moving, but he said, you know, we've been together before. And I just looked at
Really?
him
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, in the peripheral of my left side, I'm seeing movement. And I can't move my head, but I moved my eye, looked over, and this round head with a big black eye thing was
Uh-huh.
coming down to my face. And I could see the neck. It was really, really skinny. And all I could think about was it was long and skinny. And I kept thinking, how is that neck holding up that head? And
Okay.
what is this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had a vision of it being very tall and thin, and it gave me the impression it was a gigantic spider standing on two legs. And the funny thing is, back then, when I was 11, I had never seen a praying mantis. I had never heard of the term. So I didn't associate it with that.
Is that what he
All
looked
I
like though?
knew, it was an insect, like a spider.
Yeah.
It was gross. It's just I it to this day I have such bad arachnophobia that if I see a spider, I'm ready to burn this place down. I mean, I can't
Yeah.
handle it. I can't. It's just especially black widows. Oh my God, they're so gross. It's so. Ugh. And so I realized, decades later that that thing was not a spider. It was a mantis in a sense.
Right.
That's what it looked like. Um, and
Did you have any sense on what they were doing to you there?
No, because after that, I kind of freaked out when I thought, oh, it's a gigantic spider. And that was it. I brought myself out
Of
of
the
the
regression?
regression. And it just, I was freaked out. I was like, oh my God. And um, the funny thing is, after that regression, um, I was delivering, because this happened I think I went in 2020 or 2019. Anyway, I was delivering medication for Kaiser hospitals, right? Door to
Hmm.
door. And I was delivering a bunch of medication to this senior center. And so this regression that I had, a few days later, I was out on the job and I was going to go into this facility. And when I was going to walk in with the medication, I looked down and there was a green praying mantis, a big one, on the ground. And I was like, "Ooh," and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, God, it's huge. And I said, "Oh, you're going to get stepped on." So I grabbed a little, there was some dirt area over here by the door. And I grabbed a little twig and I was trying to get it out of the way so that no one steps on it.
Yeah.
And all the while, I was just so grossed out by it. And I was trying to flick it, and it was standing up doing this. And I was just like, oh my God, come on. And I flicked it, and it fell over onto its back,
Wow.
and its body was exposed, and it was long and I mean thick. And I immediately, my mind went straight back to that creature, and it was that thing in but 6 feet tall or whatever, 7 feet
Yeah.
tall. It was huge. And I was very freaked out. The hypnotherapist that I went to, I know her personally, and she had invited me um that week. It was Christmas time, and she was having a few friends over, and I went there and I wanted to tell her how I was feeling because I was getting so emotional, which I'm not an emotional person like that, right? That
Yeah.
I told her, hey, I wanted to tell her, I said, hey, I know you're having a party, but I need to tell you this. I said, and I told her what happened. And I was tears were welling up in my eyes and I was getting so emotional. She goes, well, maybe we should explore this further. We'll talk about it later. And I said, okay. And I sat there on the couch at this little dinner party, and tears were just coming down, and I was so embarrassed. I was trying to stop crying, and I was so shocked over my emotional reaction.
Wow.
And if holy cow. And yeah, and I just didn't want to explore it anymore. I needed to just digest all this and kind of come to terms with it all, because I realize now how frightened I was of always wanting to really learn what really truly happened, because I think I knew subconsciously it was something that really freaked me out bad, scared me.
Do you some of these people I've talked to, and when I first started doing the research, I'd interview people. I'm pretty familiar with the drill as far as how the abduction works. But then people would go, then I was in this one situation. There was a couple guys walking around in there with military uniforms on, U.S. type military uniforms, and they call them my labs or my labs, I guess. But um, have you experienced any of that?
No. And like I
Have you
said,
interviewed people that say that?
I know a personal friend that lives up in Washington State, and he is a lifelong abductee, and he has chronicled everything. It was amazing. I saw uh, his binders of everything, and
Hmm.
he even drew pictures of everything. It was so amazing, and I think he's writing a book about it. But as I looked at his stuff, I could see all this military guys,
Yeah.
and I said to him,
What's
"Oh
this about?
wow, you're having those like military involvement." He said, "Yes." So anyway, yes. So
This
that happens
happens.
a lot.
When I first started hearing that, I thought there's no way, but there's enough people saying it. I'm quite sure it's happening. you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but let's get back to the trauma of these things happening. In my book, I actually chronicle 30 close encounter cases of mine that I've done. And I'm a very visual person, and actually, I'm very artistic. I can draw really well. I just never had ever done anything with my art. But I've always appreciated art and other people's abilities. So I hired some digital artists to recreate some of the witness drawings to bring it more to life for my book. So my
Oh,
book
wow.
actually has a lot of color. I decided to use color in my book.
Oh,
Uh,
can you hold one up to see one of the pictures?
yeah. So, and this was one of them I wanted to actually say um, about trauma. Uh, just had it. Oh, here it is.
Oh, wow. That is a
So,
nice drawing, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
and he went into great detail about this. And the red lights around there, those were just
Or
balls flying around, orbs.
yeah,
See the
that's
stuff?
pretty common though. You see that a
Yeah.
lot.
See the stuff dripping from the bottom? He
Yeah.
said it was like liquid, like metal.
Oh, it was metal.
Yeah, that's what he
Wow.
said. Well, anyway, what this was this guy, um, he ended up, this was 1994. Him and his wife, decided to go up to the Yosemite area, and she was pregnant, uh, like a 6 or 7 months pregnant.
Whoa.
And they decided there was this little spot that he had always gone up to camp, and he hunts and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So they went up there, and as he was getting the tent ready and everything, there was like a bright star, like a white star. And
Oh.
she also noticed it, like, well, what do you think that is? And he goes, I don't know.
Hmm.
And he kind of kept an eye on it as he's getting the campsite ready. And I'm sorry, they're painting the outside of my apartment. So
I
if
can't
you're
hear it.
looking,
You're
yeah,
fine.
yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, so this thing got larger and closer, and now he
Yeah.
started to get kind of concerned. And
Yeah. Yeah, I would.
she's feeling very uncomfortable because now she's hearing some stuff going on in the woods, and she's just kind of freaked out.
And
So,
she's at 7 months pregnant, you said.
yeah. And he's just kind of going, I don't know. Like he said, I was getting scared. My wife is freaking out. I was becoming frightened that this thing wasn't anything he could identify, this craft. And it got closer and closer. And he just told her, uh, let's get in the car. And he left everything, and it was already dark by that time. And he started to make his way down. He says, I know these roads so well. He
You mean
said,
he left all his camping gear out and just got out of it?
everything. They
Wow.
just got in the car
Really?
and took off. And he said, I know this area like the back of my hand, been here all my life, especially this little part where he liked to camp.
Yeah, yeah.
And he got lost, he said. And he goes, I couldn't believe I didn't know where we were. And
Okay.
this craft that I just showed you, it's chasing him, and it's
Yeah, I
as
was
big
going
as
to
a
ask you if
house.
that's exactly what I was thinking too.
Yeah,
So
it was
they've got him
chasing him.
disoriented so he can't get away from him.
So the thing is, he said there was some trees, a canopy of trees that were covering this one section of the road, and he hid in it, hid the car in there, and was trying to hide. And so they parked the car, and he just told her, we'll just wait it out. Um, and the next thing he knows, the sun's coming up.
Oh,
This was hours and hours that have gone by. And he was so shocked over the fact that the sun was coming up. He didn't understand, where are all those hours gone? And they were exhausted, and I think he did go back up to get their stuff, and they just went home. But it
How was
frightened.
she as far as her pregnancy?
Well, she ended up having their son.
Okay,
Uh,
so she didn't lose her. Okay.
no, I think at 7 months. I think when they take uh, when they take the pregnancy, it's usually the first trimester, which is the first 3 months. Um,
That's when women, the scenario goes something like this. Somebody gets abducted and then they come back and they have the symptoms of a miscarriage, basically.
right, right, and it's usually the first trimester. So the first 3 months, it's gone. And then it's just like, oh, their doctor will say, oh, you must have aborted it, or something
Had a
happened.
miscarriage. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, anything. But this particular man, this frightened him so bad that he kind of stopped going to work. He didn't want to leave the house. His marriage did dissolve. And he said he never went back up there again.
Hmm.
And I felt real bad of how traumatized he was. And when they're retelling this experience, they're almost on the verge of tears because they are reliving this
Oh,
scary
I've seen them
event.
and they start getting goosebumps and stuff, that scares them. It revisit
I
it.
could
Yeah.
hear in his voice uh, the shakiness, um, just the emotion. I thought he was going to start crying on the phone, and he apologized for getting emotional. I said, "No, never apologize."
Mm-mm.
Um, you know, what happened was very scary, yes. And anybody would be in your
He,
shoes would be scared. And
he
I
was
always tell them,
there was probably more than just sitting in the car all night,
oh yeah.
and he probably got
Yeah.
abducted and probably has some screen memory but
Yeah. And so I felt bad. And so that story is in my book. Another story of a guy, he loved fishing. He lived in San Jose and would go to the Santa Cruz area. And he bought a boat, fishing boat, and him and his brother took it out there. Got up early and we're out in the middle of the bay and fishing. And he says, you know how it is in the bay. Sometimes the fog has rolled in, and so you'll have those low level
yeah,
clouds.
yeah.
And so, when you're fishing, you're sitting there, you're waiting, and you're looking around. And his brother and him were facing the opposite ways on the boat. So their backs were to each other. And he happened to look up and he realized there was a huge craft of some sort just hovering above them. And he kind of got startled because of it
Was this
saw it
at night or during the day?
in the morning. Yeah.
And so it's light out.
Yeah. So um, the fog was still kind of uh, covering it and
Yeah, yeah.
masking the whole, like he couldn't see the entire thing, but he could see that it was a huge craft of some sort just hovering above them silently. And he told his brother, hey, look up, there's something above us. And his brother just, yeah, yeah, yeah. He didn't want to even look. But he says, will you just look? Do you see this thing? And his brother didn't acknowledge it or anything. And he said, um, he doesn't remember what happens next. All he knows is they're driving home. And he goes, I
Typical.
don't even remember getting the boat out of the water,
Yep.
hitching up. And he said
Yeah.
that just freaked him out of why he couldn't remember something so simple that he would do any other day, right? And he never went back. He never went fishing ever
Did
again.
his brother ever remember any of it?
Nope. And he said, my boat sits to this day. And I said, I'm so sorry. I said, oh my God. And he
That's
said,
pretty typical, though. I remember there was a case we had on the SIP project where a couple young, teenagers, a guy and a girl are out in a pickup truck somewhere, and they see a craft, triangle craft. And so somebody decides to get the million candle power spotlight out and puts the beam of light on one of the craft. And then the next thing you know, like 3.5 hours later, they're sitting in her dad's living room and they have no clue what happened after they put the light on, you know.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah,
got
that
home, but they don't remember getting home. They don't remember any of it, And he said the first thing I remember is her dad sitting there going, "Are you guys okay?" And we're sitting in the living room, and you know,
yeah, it just, man, and yeah, I just felt so bad that these two men's lives changed in a negative way, where they just didn't enjoy what they were doing before. That one guy with the Yosemite, like his favorite little camping spot, never again. Nope.
well,
Uh,
one of the things that now there's all the stuff that's coming out, but generally, um, the people that I've interviewed I mean, they obviously went through these experiences, and then probably most of it was done against their will, but generally they wouldn't say that those guys were not, they were benevolent. They weren't like trying to kill them or doing anything, unnecessarily violent to them. Um, but I guess sometimes some of these people would say that they gave him visions, like that I think there's a concern of like pollution and nuclear proliferation and things like that that somehow gets conveyed to some of these people. One woman said they took her they had a screen on the wall, like a window, and they took her over there and were showing her all these, like a TV interview kind of shows, that kind of thing.
hmm.
But the most of the time the abductions are taken. I was talking to a guy last night that was abducted when he was a kid, and they took him through a window, you know, and that it just somehow they can change the molecular density, probably by going to a higher frequency, which is a lower density where you could actually go through a wall or something like that. But a lot of people talk about going through the ceiling, going through the wall, just being without opening the door, which in itself is pretty incredible.
Right, right. That didn't happen to me. Um, uh, when this incident happened to me, it was in the summer. And so, of course, I was out of school, and we had this big tree in front of our house. And the interesting thing about this tree was whoever planted it on a man-made mound. Okay. So that was a circular mound, and it was surrounded, they put rock around this mound, and this rock was like a dark gray with these tiny little holes, so almost looked like coral, right, like a coral rock,
Okay. This was in your
and
yard.
in front of our house. So I would climb up the tree and sit up there and spy on the kids and pretend I was, I don't know, in
Whatever.
cowboys and Indians, whatever, and spying on the kids and be up there in the tree. And I was very tall and thin, and so putting my body in between some of the
Yeah,
main
right.
branch there, I felt very comfortable. I was up there every day, um, and. And then that one day, I'm up in the tree, and the next minute I know I'm waking up about 6 feet away from the base of the tree, um, coming up, like waking up, coming to consciousness.
What, were you
And
just laying on the ground or something?
yeah, I was just laying
Did
on
you
the
fall
ground.
out of the tree, do you think, or?
No, here's the thing. I may have been only 11, but I wasn't stupid. And I realized, because I got up quickly and was like, what happened? It was so far away, okay,
Yeah.
that I'm in my body's my body is in between like two main branches from the base, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there. But if I fell, if I lost
You'd have been
consciousness,
right under the tree.
I would have hit those rocks, those sharp,
Right,
that
right.
rock.
Instead, you were laying 6 feet away on the ground.
Yeah, it was way over here.
Wow.
So I was
So you
waking
think
up.
somebody picked you up and brought you back, obviously.
So because I don't remember from being up there to waking up, coming to consciousness way over here off the ground. I was just like, so, this doesn't make sense. Like I would have, if I would have fell, because I stood and looked up at the tree and said, if I fell, I would have fallen on these rocks. I would have hurt myself. And, there was no marks. I wasn't hurt. Uh,
When you were talking about the regressions, I was talking to Les Velez, from Opus,
mhm.
Les, and he was saying that it's in the podcast we just did that he's somewhere at a conference or something. Some guy comes up to him and goes, "Hey, I know you," and he goes, "Okay, where?" He goes, "I've seen you before and stuff." And Les is like, "Well, where was it? Which conference or what?" And the guy goes, "It wasn't in a conference." And he goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "We were in a ship." And he goes, "You were sitting on a bench and you were freaking out, and they made me go over and try to get you settled down." And Les is like, he had a regression done, and they couldn't find that. And then the guy was looking at past lives, and they think maybe these two had actually been abducted in a different life or something. So,
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
it just gets so weird that it's almost makes your head hurt, But
Yeah, I
um,
mean, and it also kind of is interesting because when I have a best friend that I met a long time ago, and I remember when we were introduced, I looked at her and I thought this was a total stranger, right?
yeah.
That I knew her. And in somewhere in my head, it was like, oh, you're going to be best friends. And I thought, yeah, whatever. And it turned out we're best friends to even to this day. And I've known her about 40 years now. And
Well, they
uh,
say when you come back and you reincarnate, you back some of the same people are in the same time space
yes, in fact,
reality.
I did have I did some automatic writing with someone that does that, and I found out that my best friend and I we lived a past life in like in Asia, uh, like
Whoa.
back in the I know they were having let's just back in Asia, and there was wars going on, and this was like I don't know 700s or something. It
Oh,
was
wow.
just
Long
yeah, it
time.
was just a long time ago, and so it's very interesting. And I went to the Roswell Festival in 2012. And I remember coming across Kim. She wrote that book, The Art of Close Encounters. And she's an
Mhm.
abductee, and she's written a book back in the late 80s called In My Wildest Dreams. And she was there,
Literally.
she was there uh, as a speaker. And I walked up to her and I said, "Oh, I really enjoyed your book." And she had that book I just talked about, The Art of Close Encounters. It's kind of like a tabletop book, very beautiful uh, um, book. And she had it open. And I looked at her and she kind of was looking at me with a smile. And I go, "What?" And she goes, I, I, I think I've seen you before. And I go, "Well," she goes, I met you before." And I go, "Well, no, no." And she's smiling at me and she goes, "Yeah, I've met you before." And then I looked down, I just kind of smiled at her. And then I looked down at her book and I go, "Oh, it's a very beautiful book." And I kind of flipped the pages and the page opened up and we both looked down and it was a picture, a drawing, a very beautiful drawing of like a mass abduction where it was a huge area with all these beds and all these abductees laying on the beds with the aliens standing around. And I looked down at it and she looked down at it and she goes, "This is where I saw you at." And I just looked at her as she's pointing to this huge room on the ship of all these people being abducted, a mass abduction with all these people, humans laying on the tables. And I just said, "Oh man."
So some things just, yeah, you don't, I mean, I've had people say, well, we'll regress you and see what, and I'm like, nah, not
Yeah.
now.
And
I've
you know
got
what I
things miles to go before I sleep, that's the way.
and you know this is what I always tell because I have interviewed over 100 people that have been abducted, and when they want to talk about uh, getting a name of a hypnotherapist in their local area, uh, I always remind them. I said, okay, but just ask yourself, are you ready to learn the truth? And number two, do you have a support system at home? Because sometimes
Yeah.
other memories are going to come through and you'll need to talk to somebody.
And if
And
all your family thinks you're an idiot, that's not a good
so
environment.
I always tell them you can always contact me and I will listen. I'll be there
Well,
for
and
you.
the Opus has a lot of people that are available like that too.
Yes.
Um,
So this was before Opus
right.
when I was
Yeah, yeah,
talking
yeah.
about this kind of stuff because I always tried to be there for everybody. I always want to be available if they want to talk about this kind of thing. Because I know how it feels. So,
Yeah. Do you have how if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do it?
um,
Do you have a website or anything for it?
yes. So, Northern California MUFON.com. And if you go to the About Us page, you'll see me and my team, and my
Let me
email
get that.
is
I'll make sure I put that on the screen too. It's Northern California.
MUFON.com. Yeah, so my email is there.
Cool. Okay. Well, this has been fun. It's good to see you and talk about,
Yeah,
a long time since we did deployments, but there's a lot of stuff going on right now. And I think, when I was talking to Lester, he's like, gosh, he's been around for 30 years, and we were all saying that, there's so much stuff breaking now that's coming out that's unbelievable, that a lot of these people were playing their cards real close to the chest and keeping quiet. And a lot of them they're out singing like canaries right now because they know it's time.
yeah.
You've got all the energy.
I really love the historical cases when they come in because it's usually of craft being seen at close range. It's not because a lot of sightings that are coming in that are happening today are a lot of orbs, it seems. But a lot of these historical cases are of these craft, and I am very fascinated by all the different shaped crafts. And that's why in my book, chapters 3 through 6, I divided it up into the shape of craft. So, like I have, rectangular, you have
Boomerangs, rectangles, triangles,
yes. So
saucers, orbs.
that's how I
Cubes.
laid out the book. And
Yeah.
so I have these 30 cases uh, divvied up into those different shaped craft chapters.
Yeah. It seems like early there was a lot of saucers back in the day. Now there's more triangles and not to mention that some of these things are huge too. I mean, like real huge.
Mhm.
Because I was talking to this guy and he goes, it was huge. And I'm like, what do you mean by huge? Define huge. He goes, like as big as a strip mall shopping center. Yeah.
Yeah,
And the one
I,
guy
I'm
I said, if you held your hand out at arm's length, how big was the craft? Was it like a dime or an aspirin and he going, tar. And I'm like, what do you mean? The tar. And I'm like, what is he talking about? He goes, a car tire. Was this, it was like, I'm like, oh,
Yeah. And you have to really, sometimes people don't understand when I'm asking them at arm's length. And so they'll tell me, oh, 40 foot, like a 40-foot bus. And then I'll say, okay, so here we are, you and me standing next to a 40-foot bus, and I'm leaning on it. And at arm's length, yes, it's 40 feet, right? I said, okay, stand here. I'm going to take that bus. I'm going to drive it a block away. Now, how big is it? Oh. at
Yeah.
arm's length.
Yeah.
Right. So
Um,
that distance makes a difference of how that 40-foot craft or bus or whatever is going to be at a distance.
well, I
Then they get a better
remember in my
understanding.
day and when I was working for the government, we went in this, it was about hazmat stuff. And the guy said, what you do is you extend your arm straight out, put your thumb up. And he goes, if you can't cover the entire affected area with your thumbnail, then you're too close. And I was like, that's a pretty good roll.
Yeah.
Uh, well, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's a little early. You're a couple, 3 hours ahead of me there,
Yeah.
California. But it really was fun talking to you. I'll get this up in the next day or so, and I'll send you the link. You can watch it, and
Okay,
feel free
great.
to send it out to some friends and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And I also got a series going. The AeroOps, we're doing a series on investigator like equipment. The first one was like how to put a kit together, the stuff you want to take, and then there's the 6 most important meter readings you can use, and then there's another one that's on imaging cameras and stuff like that. That'll all be out in a few weeks too. If you know any investigators who might want to watch them, they're free.
Mhm.
But anyway, thanks a lot. Be safe, and I'll talk to you soon.
All
I'll,
right. Thanks a lot, Richard. Good seeing you.
okay, hold on a second. Please check out our website at AEROPS.site. You'll be able to find current posts, new information, and a list of advisory board members. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.